Shut up and sit down.
Bairnsdale in Victoria's East Gippsland region is a rural service town that supports many farms around the Gippsland Lake area. Its primary economic drivers are in its sizable education, retail, medical and retirement sectors. With a courthouse and a hospital, the town itself is an administrative centre. To the town's east are freshwater lakes that are very similar in style and structure to the Coorong in South Australia and Lake Macquarie in New South Wales, where they all have a similar long coastal drive around the internal lakes to access the beach on the other side. Bairnsdale itself, there aren't many touristy things to do here. The lakes and the rivers are the predominant geological feature, with the main tourist attraction being targeted at recreational boating and fishing enthusiasts. There are cruises and boat hire available to those who are aquatically challenged, but without a love of water, there's only really fields of green grass to look at. Some of the paddocks along the river floodplains are planted with vegetables and the odd apple orchard, but many of the fields are just growing grass. And that's not the smoking kind, that's the cow eating kind. There is so much grass being grown in this area that the hay selling business is so flooded with competition that storing hay becomes problematic. The entrance of the Gippsland Lakes is a better holiday location with ample space and commercial recreational fishing. At the lake entrance there are sheltered swimming locations and smooth enough water for even the most beginner of jet skier. North of the lake entrance is a similar ecosystem with Lake Tyre, with its soft golden sands of Lake Tyre Beach. This fairly well marks the southern end of the east coast, with its very familiar smell of the South Pacific Ocean. North of East Gippsland's flatlands is the Great Alpine Road, which cuts its way through the Great Dividing Range. This road has many smaller towns dotted along its path, and Burton is the first in the Gippsland's high country. In Victoria there are a number of isolated bushwalks, which don't particularly go anywhere, and Burton has a few of them. Coming from Sydney, where there are numerous interconnecting walking tracks, the Victorian style of track is noticeably different. The Great Alpine Road looks to be a motorcycling magnet, but all roads seem to flow inland towards Albany and are regrettably outside the scope of the Big Lap. Leaving Melbourne, the locals obviously wanted to give me a parting gift, as someone attempted to steal the bike and after failing decided to souvenir the dash cameras and the caps from the tyre valves. It's really that vindictive attitude of big city losers that left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I was very thankful to be heading out of town where the riffraff have clearly taken over. This experience only reaffirmed my initial assessment that Melbourne in no way rivals Sydney, but only competes with towns like Tennant Creek and Fitzroy Crossing as Australia's biggest hellhole. Packing up the bike in such a state that I broke the zipper on my backpack and will now need to strap it together until I get back to Sydney. But even with that, I still consider myself lucky that the attempts to steal the bike didn't damage it so badly that I couldn't continue on to the next stop. I left Melbourne pondering what's worse, an apathetic Melbourne police who do nothing, or a Sydney police who only leave the police station if it's a favour for a friend. One of the side goals of completing the Big Lap was to visit all the extreme cardinal points of the Australian mainland. A rather naive goal I set myself after visiting the lighthouse at Byron Bay, but then failed to get any closer than 300 kilometres to Cape York and missing Step Point by about 40 odd kilometres. I realised that the 15-kilometre walking track to South Point was going to be too difficult, but I still wanted to get as close as reasonably practical to the southernmost point, which was the Telegraph Saddle viewing platform just outside of Tidal River, where the road ended. Getting to the gatehouse of the Wilson's Promontory National Park, which is about 30 kilometres north of the Tidal River, I then realised that the national park, the entire southern peninsula was going to be full of authorised vehicle-only roads and no drone zones. I got to the Tidal River camping site and found it full of Victorians, sitting in their caravans all day while waiting for the nighttime movie to play in the open-air cinema and eating overpriced chicken and gravy rolls with light servings of no chips, as hot chip jokes are not funny. I couldn't get to the viewing platform as the road was closed to private traffic and an organised bus ride was too problematic, as I was no longer willing to leave the bike and all its luggage near Melburnians after what happened earlier that morning. I tried my best to get a glimpse of the most southern point, but the best I was able to do was to see Ansell Island, which is just west of the point. Fighting my way through a bad day was starting to get to me, and without Vodafone reception, Google Maps had its usual spat while trying to reroute after taking a moment for some photographs. Memorising the roads in Victoria is a bit more difficult than other parts of the country, as there are just many more roads around here. So I just hope that the street signs pointed me in the quickest direction. Finally crossing the long waterhole just south of Sale, I stopped for a quick break to check out the Billabong and the La Trobe Swing Bridge, and I was reminded of the Victorian car problem. So far the day had been a painful ride, little more than rolling green hills and a road to look at. I was now only a few kilometres out of Sale, and after missing lunch I was hopeful for an early dinner, but ultimately I was just satisfied with some Vodafone reception. Making my way to the accommodation, my good luck finally kicked in as there was a griller, and I decided to buy myself a steak and a bottle of red wine to celebrate my escape from Melbourne. Staying on a country farm with a young family, hearing toddlers' feet run across the ceiling and with the occasional tears of a newborn, it's still more strangely relaxing compared to the bustle of Melbourne. My on-the-road cooking skills have greatly improved over the course of the journey, and for the first time in over a year I managed to cook myself a steak with some chicken tenderloins. In some ways the time in the country does move more slowly, and being here for the last week it's given me the desire to open up a country pub somewhere. Because like everybody else out here, I'm so exhausted just watching the grass grow that I don't want to move. I was very nervous leaving Melbourne, as whoever liberated the dash cameras may have done some damage to the bike that I didn't notice. I last got the bike serviced in Adelaide, which means that it's now up for the next service, although I'm trying to get back to Sydney before organising it. I'm guessing that the clutch plates and the brake pads are starting to wear thin, and much more maintenance will soon be required to keep the bike safe. Maybe if they did steal the bike, then I would have been in line for a good insurance payout. NBN is quite solid out here, and Vodafone picks up in the larger towns. There isn't much need for the satellite dish, and I guess I can now end the service without causing any disruptions. I'm not sure if I should dump the dish rather than lugging it all the way back to Sydney, but I've made more expensive mistakes in the past. I don't think I'll replace the bike's dash cameras, as it's getting close to the end of the journey, and I expect that the bike will live the rest of its life in the back of my uncle's shed. I don't know why someone took the bike cameras. I can only assume that the vindictive prick who took them is too arrogant to throw them out, and every time he looks at them, he'll realise just what sort of stupid, selfish prick he is. But on the flip side, I'm guessing that'll require too many brain cells, and it's just wishful thinking. After travelling around almost the entire country, and seeing that everybody else has a higher standard of life than the poor do in the big cities, I don't understand the attraction for these people to migrate to the cities, except for the fact that they need a level of competency that they don't have to survive without a public transport network. The countdown is on, as I'm only 750 kilometres away from Sydney and completing the big lap. In some ways, in the past year has moved so fast that I really feel like I've lived about 10 years in the last 12 months. So much so that spending the next year just sleeping sounds like a good idea. I'm still unsure what the next phase of my life will be, but right here and right now, all I'm focusing on is encompassed by the words made famous by the Wallflowers. We can drive it home. Next stop is Bega on the southern coast of New South Wales, with lunch in Mallacoota to say goodbye to Victoria. Heading north, I didn't feel like I'd left the Sydney bubble until I got past the Gold Coast, and now coming up from the south, I'm not too sure when I'll start feeling like I've returned. Here in East Gippsland, there are familiar signs to New South Wales, such as the Anarame and Mobile, but there are still quite a lot of Victorians around here that I don't feel like I'm at home. So thanks for following my adventures around Australia, and remember to go out there and do something to enjoy your day.